Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss the 1984 version of Firestarter, starring Drew Barrymore, George C. Scott, David Keith, Martin Sheen, Art Carney, Louise Fletcher, Heather Locklear, Freddie Jones, and Moses Gunn, and directed by Mark L. Lester. Now, I'm not familiar with this series, so I'm kind of a newbie, and it's leading up to the newest remake that's coming out on Friday the 13th in May. So let's just get straight into this, shall we? We get a strange musical choice in the opening credits, and all of a sudden we open the movie in Washington, D.C., where we get Andrew McGee, who has played by David Keith, and his daughter Charlie, played by Drew Barrymore, running from government agents as they catch a taxi cab to going to the airport. And Andrew apparently has some psychic powers and gives the driver a $500 bill, as there's no such thing, which is stupid. We go through a dream scene of how Andrew first met Vicky, played by Heather Locklear, in a class and they fall in love while putting something in them to make them drowsy. And we learn she's also a psychic, which is also kind of odd. And Andrew wakes up as they're at the airport and they have nothing left to sell as they have no money to get on a plane, and they have no choice but to get on foot to seek some shelter while Charlie witnesses a woman who's bruised talking to her abusive boyfriend about how she's pregnant and he wants nothing to do with her, and as well as the baby, as Charlie puts his feet on fire, and which is Charlie's power, as she's a fire starter to begin with. And as a superpower is not a good thing, and the acting is pretty bad in this, including Drew Barrymore, as she was better in E.T. than here. Andrew and Charlie almost get killed by a truck as they save each other's lives and move on to a motel where Andrew dreams of how to help Charlie control her fire starting. And we get another dream where Vicky was killed off screen. And do we get a sense of what happened to her? Absolutely fucking not. As he dreams of the government agents getting Charlie and controlling them with his mind by blinding them, and sends a neighbor named Joan to go back inside her house. And is this becoming a mess of a movie? Hell yes, it is. Captain Hollister, played by Martin Sheen, is visited in his office by John Rainbird, played by George C. Scott, along with Dr. Joseph Wanless, played by Freddie Jones, as they torment Joe about getting the McGees as their powers came from the father, as he makes her sound like Armageddon, as the shots are terribly filmed, but it was the 1980s to be fair, and the acting, like I said, is terrible, and I don't really care for these characters. Andrew and Charlie think about going to Knoxville, Tennessee, as they hitch a ride from Irv Manders, played by Art Carney, and as Charlie is hungry and has lunch at his house with his wife Norma, played by Louise Fletcher, as we see they have a farm, and what a terrible idea for Irv to bring them home for lunch, as he doesn't know them at all. First of all, second of all, Andrew and Charlie could have been killed by them, and all of a sudden, what is Charlie burned them and their farm with chickens down, which I'm not sure they don't mean to, and the government agents might have them killed, which is very problematic to begin with. The government agents come to the home of the Manders after they see Charlie can control heat, and Irv thinks about getting his shotgun towards the government agents, and all of a sudden Charlie is burning the government agents as one turns into skeleton, and Andrew advises the government agents to get the fuck out of there or else Charlie will burn them half to hell, and sort of get the Manders involved, but Norma tells Andrew and Charlie to take the Jeep and get away. And why did they need to involve them to begin with, which is something I'll never understand, as the script is a mess and makes no sense, which makes me worried about the new movie, as I can't tell if it's a total remake or a reboot based on the trailers. Andrew and Charlie go to a cabin which is abandoned, and then my question becomes, what kind of a genre does this movie want to be? A horror movie or a thriller or even an action movie? Which doesn't make much sense. we get one random scene of Dr. Wanless getting killed, and which I think could have been in the editing room floor, in my opinion. A woman sees Andrew and Charlie on the streets and calls Captain Hollister, as Jon wants to get close to Charlie, as he's insane to think about that. As the next scene, Jon kills a mailman to get to the cabin with another agent while they wrote a letter to the New York Times, and they maybe haven't gotten it, but Charlie is afraid that the running away will never be over, and Jon shoots something in Charlie's neck and gets Andrew's back, as some men are in fireproof suits capture them, and the score is kind of distracting, as I'm unfortunately not caring for this movie at all. Andrew wakes up demanding to see Charlie, while Dr. Finchot, played by Moses Gunn, visits and wants to get acquainted with to Andrew, while Captain Hollister visits Charlie, as she tells Hollister to go to hell, as she tells him about her power called pyrokinesis, as he wants her to cooperate while she demands to see her father and boils the cocoa he gives her. And the problem I'm having is the movie goes one way for an hour, and another hour we're getting sort of a drama, which doesn't make any sense either. Jon comes in as a janitor to talk and help Charlie cooperate with the government while they interrogate and torture Andrew, while trying to use his powers on another agent to put ink in his water, which is ridiculous to the point it made me sick. Jon comes in to clean the room as Charlie talks with him, as they're starting to get along slowly when the storm hits the lights in the room and acts like a total fool, as he becomes friends with Charlie. And I felt bad for George C. Scott, as I've seen him in Doctor Strangelove and Patton, and he's done better movies than this for damn sure. The directing here is rather dumb, as Charlie calls Jon his father, and the next scene, she tests her powers on some wood chips, and the wind as she's inside starting fire, and the wind as she does it is obvious that the fan is on the set, is blowing it, as it's a fake. And Hollister tells Jon and the doctor that Charlie will never see her father again, which just feels pretty damn harsh, as this movie is pretty negative, as its message is completely negative. For example, Hollister thinks of taking Andrew to Maui, Hawaii in the future without Charlie, which is a little negative, I'll say. Jon takes Charlie horseback riding on a horse named Necromancer, which made me think of The Hobbit, as the animated movie had come out before this movie did. But I don't remember that movie well enough, as we get more bad special effects with the wind while inside, and she starts fire on the fucking wall, which looked pretty bad. Charlie demands to see her father, while Andrew changes the channel to Woody Woodpecker, which I found a little amusing, while he would hear him laugh like, as I sort of laughed. Meanwhile, Jon tells Hollister he'll take Charlie, as he plans to kill her, and Hollister says to him he is crazy, and the movie tells me obviously he's fucking crazy, while Hollister arranged a trip to Hawaii for Andrew, as he makes demands Hollister and Charlie to come with them, which is silly for sure. Andrew writes a note to Charlie as she tells Jon she'll be out of here the night of. Andrew and Hollister going to Hawaii, and Jon thinks of a way to stop Charlie from going on the helicopter, as he points a gun at her while in the horse barn, as he fools her into coming towards him until Andrew comes in the barn and tells her Jon lied to her, and she uses her fire powers, and Andrew gets her away from Jon, and Hollister tries to kill Jon, but Jon kills Hollister and shoots Andrew, Jon telling Charlie to come to him, as he sees her eyes and shoots fireballs, but she breaks the bullet. Or actually, he shoots her first, but she breaks the bullet, which is convenient. The barn is on fire, and Andrew tells Charlie to leave, but she doesn't want to, as government agents arrive, and she burns them and lets the horses out. And the government agents run away, as she throws a bad-looking fireball towards the doctors and burns all the government agents, which looked terrible, as this movie looked unfinished. A helicopter comes in and Charlie burns it up and burns the house down. As she goes to the Manders and calls it home, and she makes them their foster parents, or makes them her foster parents, and goes to the New York Times. But the climax felt ridiculous, and at the end of the day, this is kind of a stupid movie. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 4.1 out of 10. The acting is terrible from all the actors, including a young Drew Barrymore, and the plot is a mess of a plot, as unfortunately I didn't care for this movie. The special effects look cartoony, as the score is very irritating at times, as it was the 1980s, and I can't believe how some of this looked unfinished. Some of this was rather silly, as I felt bad for George C. Scott, as he's been in better movies than this, as this movie is ridiculous and stupid, as the concept is very unconvincing. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Firestarter Rekindled. And until then, liar, liar, pants on fire.